Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Promised Land podcast, all about Manchester United and their endless plight, it seems. This season is turning, or has been for a little while, a bit of a disaster. And it just doesn't really show any signs of turning around, does it? A 1-1 draw with Fenerbahce, Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce in the Europa League on Thursday night. They were outpossessed. Remember this. Remember when Jose Mourinho was in charge of United and that feeling that you had of, right, okay, we know exactly how we're going to play and we're not going to be on the front foot. Well, United come up against a Jose Mourinho team last night who were very much, more or less, on the front foot, had more possession than Erik Ten Hag's Manchester United, created better chances, arguably, even though the manager might tell you something different. We did have some classics, though. We had Jose Mourinho sent to the stands with a referee rant for the ages towards the end of the night and on a television interview. But nonetheless, a draw with Fenerbahce. United, 3 draws in the Europa League group stages so far. 21st place in the Europa League out of 36 teams. Sandwiched between Victoria Pilsen and Elfsborg. United will play Victoria Pilsen before the end of the year away from home as well. 1 year without winning in Europe. 1 win in 11 against European opposition in Europe, with the last being against Copenhagen. And the only reason why that came about was because of a 96th minute penalty save by Andre Onana in the Champions League just around a year ago. 7 wins in the last 22 games in the Premier League. And pretty bleak, isn't it? It's pretty bleak, I've got to say. I didn't want to start the show off too much on a negative footing, but it seems like I just have. I'll try and keep the spirits up a little bit more, because it's not as bad in the Europa League. It's not as bad in the Europa League standings as it maybe looks at the moment. It's still plenty of time to turn things around, but the question really is, will United actually turn it around? Because we've been waiting for a long time for United to turn a corner. They simply have not done so yet. Loads of stories coming out of this game last night. Amad Diallo, I'll focus on him today. Does not seem to be getting a fair chance. Does not seem to be getting a chance. His contract is up at the end of the season. Although, I believe the club do have some control on that situation at the moment, even though a penny for his thoughts. We'll dive into that a little bit. Joshua Zirkzee as well. I'll talk a little bit about him, and I'll look ahead to the West Ham game on Sunday at the London Stadium, back in the Premier League, where really I'm talking about turning things around. United need to start picking up wins, and they need to start doing it fast and consistently. And this run of games was pretty important to start doing that, especially with Erik Ten Hag still in charge. The winning habit needs to come back, and quickly, but it is not there at the moment. Anyway, yeah, subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already on Apple and Spotify and YouTube as well if you'd like to watch. Like the stream, leave a comment, anything. Please do get in touch with me as well on social media at @Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok as well. I will start posting on TikTok at some point soon. If you're, well, mind you, I don't know how many of you actually do use TikTok. I'm very much in the generation above or before the TikTok generation. So it's a little bit difficult for me to kind of continually post on there. But Twitter is where I usually put my sarcastic thoughts. This week, Manchester City have gone unbeaten for longer in Europe than Manchester United have. And, obviously, surely they'd have won the Champions League last season if that was actually true. But hey, that's caused a little bit of debate over the last few days. But yeah, let's talk United, because how are you feeling? Let me know. Get in touch with me. How are you feeling? My timeline tells me that people aren't feeling too good at the moment, and I completely understand why. My grand take on this at the moment, I'm trying to detach a little bit. I actually quite enjoyed the game last night just for what it was, in the sense of, United created some good chances. It was an entertaining game. Not entertaining in the sense of like Manchester United doing good things for most of it, but just as a football match, I thought it was okay. But that is not what you want really when you're watching United, hoping for them to turn things around. But I think I'm just at the point now really where tolerance of mediocrity is seeping in, isn't it? And it brings apathy with it. It brings a certain level of detachment. And yes, I completely agree. The arguments are like, how did United fall to this point where 7 wins in 22 in the Premier League, 1 win in 11 in Europe? The goal difference as well. Even in the Europa League, it's 0. In the Premier League, it's minus. It was minus for most of last season as well. I think it finished minus as well. And even in the first season that Ten Hag had, United weren't scoring that many goals. So that's always been a concern. And when is that going to turn around? I think we have to ask that question. But obviously, the team in charge here are giving Erik Ten Hag time. How long is it going to take? So let me know. Please get in touch, as I say, on social media, how you're feeling, or in the comments, or let me know how you're feeling. Because if you continually get wrapped up in how bad this is, I think you'll have a pretty bad time. So what I try and do, stand back a little bit, just watch it for what it is, and just hope that in the long run, eventually the right decisions and enough of the right decisions will be made where United can start moving forward properly off the pitch and then on it. Whether Erik Ten Hag will be the man to turn that around on the pitch in the long term, I think most people by now, including me, have lost faith that that is going to be the case. But, he's still in the job, so he still has time until he doesn't have time. So, yes, there's lots of things which are spelling a pretty bleak picture. The only way that this will turn around really is if United start winning matches, and that's going to have to start with West Ham. It had to start, like I said on a recent episode, that United have to start putting consistent wins together in both the Europa League and in the Premier League and in the cup competitions, because winning fixes a lot of things. It really does. And just not getting enough of them at the moment. Just not getting enough of them. So just to touch back on a point I just made around, it's not time to panic yet in the Europa League, that is. United's fixtures in the group stage, they've had 3 so far. They've got another 5 left to play. The next 2 games are at Old Trafford against PAOK from Greece and Bodo Glimt. Bodo Glimt have won 2 and drawn 1 of their first 3 matches so far. And I think they beat Roma. I think it was Jose Mourinho's Roma, actually 6-1 a few years ago. So we wait and see. They might not be as easy. I'm sure United will make it more difficult than it needs to be. Both of those matches are in November. There's a fixture against Victoria Pilsen away. Then in January, because the Europa League and the Champions League this season, the group stage or the league stages of these competitions, finish off at the end of January. Rangers visit on the 23rd of January, and then FCSB, I believe Steaua Bucharest, is the final game. And that's talking about atmospheres. I think that one is an atmosphere that might be quite difficult. Fenerbahce is always a difficult place to go. Istanbul is always a difficult place to go for a lot of teams. And like in isolation, I think the fact that United have taken a draw from Porto and a draw from Fenerbahce, not the worst results in the world, but I think the wider context of this is just, it's brought into this constant malaise, which United just can't seem to escape. And we're not seeing enough encouraging patterns from the team. We're seeing wasted passes. We're seeing interesting decisions from the manager as well. And I know that ultimately the manager will pay the price for this if this continues for, I say, X amount of time. I don't know how long he's going to have. Will he actually have the rest of the season? Remains to be seen. Or will there be a point where Ineos do make the decision and the change in mid-season? I think I spent a lot of time, defending Ten Hag for knowing the problems that United had with culture and the work ethic and that kind of thing. And I went pretty big in the past on players not really being fitted or able to adapt to the high energy system that Ten Hag wants to play. But they have moved, they moved a lot of players on. There's still question marks, obviously, about the energy in midfield, and like a plus and a positive last night was Manuel Ugarte made an unbelievable block on the line and was important in the first goal as well, winning the ball back from Fred. But there's not enough really in this team at the moment to take positives out of. There's not enough in this team at the moment to think, right, we're working on that and we can see progress, because often it's just United seem to get overpowered in matches. And what United went up against in Istanbul was a midfield of two former United midfielders in Fred and Sofian Amrabat. Amrabat actually spoke out before the game about why he was not at Manchester United anymore. In case you haven't seen it, he essentially said, just ask Mr. Wilcox. So it seems like Jason Wilcox made the decision on that. Erik Ten Hag would have preferred to have kept him around, but Jason Wilcox and United's transfer team at the time made that decision. So maybe there's some evidence there of things changing within the club, but they've been pretty constant on wanting to give Erik Ten Hag enough time to be able to turn things around. But as fans, I can completely understand that we're not seeing enough at the moment. We're not seeing enough. And in isolation, the results in Porto and Istanbul are not terrible, but the manner of the results are quite alarming, mirrored or mixed in with the wider context of the form. As I say, 21st in the Europa League, sandwiched between Victoria Pilsen and Elfsborg, is not a good look. But it's not time yet to panic in the Europa League specifically, because there is time to turn it around, and that fixture list is pretty favourable. I think that the most difficult fixtures in this competition or league stage have taken place. The two games that United have recently played, Porto and Fenerbahce. But do we have any confidence that United will play these next two games against Bodo Glimt and PAOK and Pilsen and go there and just win? No, not really. Wins have been few and far between so far, and Erik Ten Hag is losing faith with even his biggest, biggest supporters, really. I don't know how many of them are left now. If you are, I'd be really interested to know what you're still clinging on to. I'm not the type of person to go out there and say, no, you're completely wrong. This is always a game about opinions. Like there was a long time where I could see positives in what United were doing, but I think there's been a lot of regression. I think we've seen new players integrated into Ten Hag's team, and weird decisions or the momentum not continued. Weird decisions in selection. I'll talk about Ahmad in a second versus Mazraoui. That is quite incredible, really. I think there are parts of Ten Hag and what he's trying to do that I understand. But ultimately, these things have to start working. When you have to get value out of them, you have to be able to see the positives in what the manager's doing in order to be able to believe in it, to be able to believe in what he's doing and believe in the journey that he's taking United on. I think the questions about commitment to the team and like the energy and the ability to carry out the game plan, for me, I think Ten Hag's had enough time now and enough transfer windows to be able to not rely on that excuse, really, that those players aren't there. There's a lot of players in there who should be able to carry out and be able to control football matches. And, I don't think Ten Hag is doing enough at the moment, or the decisions he's making are not bearing fruit enough to be able to believe in what he's doing. And I came on the podcast a few weeks ago and I said the last international break was the right time to make a change. Obviously, the club have stuck by him. And my approach going into this patch of matches was that, right, we need to see results. We need to see wins, and we need to see levels of performance which make people believe in what's happening, because we ain't had it. That was my approach before the last 7 games, before the last international break. I watched those matches and I thought, not seeing enough here. And that was where essentially the last threads of belief that I had that this would work dissipated. I'm not saying it's completely irreversible, but I think for a lot of people it is, and I completely understand why. It's Difficult time at the moment, but it's still early in the season. And as long as Ten Hag's in the job, he's still got a chance to turn it around. But just, is it ever going to happen? I think that is the question we need to ask. And another question we need to ask really is why Nusayr Mazraoui was put in the number 10 and why certain players are getting omitted from the team and not getting enough minutes to be able to contribute, especially after they haven't really done too much wrong. So Jose Mourinho and Erik Ten Hag spoke about the choice. I'm sure everyone's watched the game. Obviously, if you listen to this, you know what the ploy was. Nusayr Mazraoui was named as a midfielder and the most advanced midfielder in the team for this match in the absence of Bruno Fernandes, who obviously captain, not had a great season, obviously, but captain is known for his energy and his running. And it was a big, puzzling, weird situation, especially considering the names that were left on the bench. Casemiro was brought on after about 55 minutes. Not had a great season himself, obviously, but Ahmad is the one, really. And there's a picture of him. If you're listening to the podcast or if you're watching the podcast, I will share this picture right now. It's been going around social media, but it's pretty damning. There's a picture of Ahmad on the bench or coming off the bench, and he was consoled by Ruud van Nistelrooy, Rene Hacker, and Andreas Georgsson, who are on the United coaching team. And Ahmad's expression being brought on as a substitute for a substitute after Anthony got injured in the 87th minute of this game. His face is a picture. If you're watching the podcast, you can see it on the screen. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you can just give it a quick search. It's pretty easy to find. Ahmad is not happy. Maybe even saw it on the TV screen itself when you were watching the game. But this is a player who, what must he be thinking? That penny for his thoughts is what I've got in the notes. Penny for his thoughts, because obviously Ahmad came into the team at the start of the season, in pre-season, and really probably was United's best player in pre-season. Probably was. Lots of positives. He scored that goal against Liverpool towards the back end of last season in the FA Cup. One of the most famous goals in the last few years that United player has scored. Absolute scenes at Old Trafford that day. And you thought maybe he'd be able to kick on by this point. But it's just not happening for him. And I think a lot of people are puzzled as to why. Now, what Ten Hag has said in relation to why he didn't pick him. In his post-match, he said, Ahmad's doing well, but I must also reward the performances of Anthony in training. He's a threat in almost every training, so I felt in that moment to bring him and decide the game. And on the Mazraoui choice to actually start with a fullback in that number 10 role ahead of Ahmad in the first place, Ten Hag said, away from home in Europe, hectic ambience to start with 4 attackers is too much. Noose is very capable to play in that position. I made him a fullback when he played number 10. He was helping midfield, supporting Xherdan and pressing, and a big part for the goal for Eriksen. And that was the case. But I think some careless, sloppy passes from Mazraoui in that position, leading to ball turnovers, that kind of thing. And obviously, not as much of a threat as Ahmad would have been in that situation. Because there's been times where Ahmad's been out on loan at the likes of Sunderland. I know that's the Championship, but that was a couple of years ago, and that was a particularly fruitful spell for Ahmad, and a big part in his upturn in his career because he's been out on loan at other places, and it's not really gone too well. But maybe that is. I'd like to see Xherdan in that position, actually, or I said previously I'd like to see Xherdan in that position at number 10, but obviously if Ten Hag feels like that's too attacking, then maybe there's justification in that reason. But the optics are bad. The optics are bad. To select a right back in that position ahead of a player who has essentially done nothing wrong, you know, it's a difficult one for people to stomach, especially when Ahmad came on and like the first thing that happened essentially was there was a crossfield pass that came over to him, crisp first touch, and then through the legs of a defender and he got fouled. And there's reports coming out that the Fenerbahce coaching staff were actually quite surprised that Ahmad hadn't been introduced by that point or wasn't used up to that point because of the technical ability that he has and the threat that he has in attack. But for some reason, there's not a desire from Erik ten Hag to pick him there. I don't think Mazraoui did enough in that role to maybe justify it. I can see the thinking from Erik ten Hag, but maybe the thinking is just too defensive. If you're a manager who's been in charge of United for 2 and a bit years and you've had that much money be spent on the team, and you've got a player who shows his threat in those positions and has shown his threat at points this season in those positions, why wouldn't you not back it? I understand that Erik ten Hag has a philosophy that he wants to stick to and get across in his team, and maybe Ahmad isn't as reliable as a Mazraoui in the defensive, in the press and in defensive situations, and that's completely cool and fair. But surely we're at a point by now where your team should be playing on the front foot and be essentially dominating matches. And I think that's the problem that fans see. That's the problem that fans have with this. And this is a theme that's been going for a number of weeks now. Like, Ahmad started the season, had a good game at Southampton, and essentially just seems to have disappeared from the first team picture since Alejandro Garnacho and Marcus Rashford have nailed down those roles on the flanks. And Bruno Fernandes is always there, obviously. But it's bizarre, and a penny for his thoughts. I really would like to. Well, I don't think we will hear from him, but that expression that he had on the touchline when he was coming on, picture tells 1,000 words, kind of thing, So I will say this: there's a swell of sentiment for Ahmad to start more matches than he has been, and I'm with that. Although I do think maybe sometimes people go a little bit too far with that. I don't think Ahmad should, by any stretch, be an automatic starter. People would like to see him play on the right and one of Garnacho and Rashford on the left side at times. And people feel as though Ahmad has done enough to justify his position in that team. Regularly, I don't feel like that. Although I do think he's got a bad hand here, and he should be considered more on the same level of rotation as the likes of Rashford and Garnacho, more so than we're seeing at the moment. Maybe there's a game where Garnacho and Rashford start, and then Ahmad comes on, and then maybe Ahmad starts the next game. Obviously, you need to try and build patterns and this kind of thing to make sure your attack starts to click, but also Ten Hag has spoke a lot about rotation over the course of the season. And Anthony's had enough time to prove himself. He's come in for a big fee, obviously, and I think most people, and maybe even those inside the club, have decided that that is a move that was obviously way too expensive and just bad for business, just in general. Speculation that he could leave on loan even in January with Anthony. But Ahmad is in a different situation. Out of contract in 8 months. And I tweeted that last night, penny for his thoughts. Although, just to clear this up, in case you have not seen this or in case you're not aware of this, United do have an option to extend by a further year on that contract. So just to clarify that, there is an option for United to extend that to 2026, regardless of what the player wants. And United put that into a lot of contracts. There are some contracts coming up this summer that don't have that option in them, but I think they have that on Harry Maguire and Amad Diallo. There's other contracts that are up, obviously, but I think that's the case for Harry Maguire and Amad. So it's not like Amad's going to be leaving on a free in the summer. Although, as we know, United have been working on extended contracts for the likes of Amad and for Kobbie Mainoo as well. And surely Amad's going to need to see more minutes than he's getting in order to believe that he has a future here. So it is a concern. And I completely get the frustration that people have, I think it's maybe this manager isn't doing anything. I do think there's a little bit of this. Maybe this manager isn't doing anything right that I see. So every problem that I have with him, I'm going to blow up and I'm going to make worse. I think it's somewhere in the middle, and like never too high, never too low. Those vibes, those thoughts come into pretty much how I see everything on football at the moment, and it's. I don't think it's a case where Ahmad should be an automatic starter, but I do think he's getting a bit of a rough hand, and I think we should be seeing more of him than we are. And I completely get the frustration that he'll have. Maybe if a manager changes, and we do see a manager will come in and use him a lot more, maybe that situation turns around fast, or maybe he needs to do more in training in order to justify Ten Hag's trust. We will wait and see. But let me know what you think on this Ahmad situation, because it's not great. I got to say, it's not great, and it's cause for concern, just like there's many causes for concern at the moment in the team. Another one is Joshua Zirkzee. He is obviously got the assist for Christian Eriksen's goal last night, which was really nice goal. Very well worked. United are showing that they do have that pace and speed in the transition and can score from it. Not doing it enough, obviously. But Joshua Zirkzee's having a difficult time at the moment and just looks off the pace. So I'll say this about him. I think he does need time to adjust. But knowing him and like seeing the type of player he has been at his former clubs, knowing the pace of the game that Erik ten Hag wants to play, I think it's going to take some time to adjust. It's going to take time to adjust to the pace and the speed and the physicality of the league. But I think he's not doing enough at the moment. And the first touch that he was meant to have that would help bring other players into play, we're not seeing it at the moment. He's losing a lot of duels in the air or with the ball at his feet, taking away the fact that he scored he provided the assist for Eriksen. It's difficult for Zirkzee at the moment because I think coming into a new club with the pressure that you have at Manchester United is just going to be difficult for most players, especially in the situation that United are in now. United are failing, and every player that comes in needs a bit of time, but you don't really get it because of the wider context, because of the results that United are getting, because of the performances that the team are putting in. And wherever that blame lies, I think I will say this about Zirkzee. There's been speculation over the last few days that this transfer's gone wrong already and he could join Juventus on loan. I think that's a load of transfer nonsense, I got to say. I would be absolutely shocked if that's the case. But I think he needs time to adjust. We've seen some players do need time to adjust, and there's maybe some positive examples that I'll talk about in a second where that time has been of a positive for them, and it shows that they maybe can come out the other side. But I'm seeing people get on Joshua Zirkzee's back a bit. Look, the performances aren't great. I've got to say, there's a lot of things that leave to be desired. But I think it's a case of this guy needs time. This kid needs time to adjust to the style, to adjust to the league, to adjust to what his teammates want of him. There was a moment last night where he had the ball and Garnacho had peeled off a defender or was one-on-one with a defender and he didn't pass it quick enough. I think that'll take him time, and that plotting that type of player into the system that you're trying to play is going to be difficult patches, and it's going to take some teething problems. But this is Manchester United at the end of the day, and you're going to get criticism if you don't hit the ground running. You're going to, especially with the context of the results and the form that the team is showing at the moment. But on positives, Andre Onana, I've just mentioned there how players need time. I think Andre Onana is a good example of that. We're not seeing really, touch wood, we're not seeing the mistakes, touch wood, that he was making last season. A miraculous double save last night where Fenerbahce were certain to score, but two amazing saves in quick succession from Onana, rivaling the double save that David Raya made in the Champions League for Arsenal a few weeks ago. And it seems like Onana, to me, he's done some interviews and he said, look, I needed 6 months or whatever to make sure that I adjust. But I think he's come through that period. And what you're seeing now is a pretty good goalkeeper, pretty solid goalkeeper who adds a lot to the team. And the character is one thing that I think is really important as well, that United need more of. And hopefully we can see a better side of Andre Onana consistently, because I think we are starting to see it. And I think maybe he's had a bad rap from all the high profile mistakes that he was making last season in the Champions League consistently, it seemed, and in other competitions, obviously. But I think he's turned a corner. And again, I'm going to touch wood and hope that this continues. But when I talk about Xerxes needing time to adjust, I think there's a lot that goes into this. And maybe I put Xerxes in the same camp as, stepping up into a much bigger club than he's been at before. I know he's been at Bayern and Onana was at Barcelona and this kind of thing, but the pressure in the first team at Man United when they're failing and when they're not doing well is difficult. And then with the lack of tactical identity that United have and that they're showing, is hard for any player really to start flourishing and flourish quickly. So Andre Onana, maybe a good example to follow. And before you look at Xerxes, I think maybe he needs to be adjusted and taken out of the firing line a little bit and brought in. But just give him time, is all I say. One player who hasn't needed time, though, I think I spoke about this on the last episode that I did. I did a tweet about it in the week or after the first half of this game. I think Matthijs de Ligt is the type of character who is able to come in and take that pressure on his shoulders and start delivering. He's had some bad performances, but I think overall, been really impressed with what I've seen from de Ligt so far. The personality that he shows, the strength that he shows, the strength of character that he shows, the pace that he shows in duels. I think he's already evolved into like a high-profile leader of that team. And I think characters like him will really be of benefit to United as they try and come out of this really poor stretch of form. If they ever get there, no matter who the manager is, I think de Ligt he was talked up as the young kids say, washed nowadays, or like damaged goods. And United got him for a pretty decent value deal after Bayern let him go. I was very much in the camp at the time when United signed him. I think this will be a good signing. And I think the start that he's made, blemishes aside, he had a bad game at Porto, so did Licha Martinez, and was substituted. But I think on the whole, I think we can be pretty happy with what de Ligt has offered so far. And we can see him potentially growing into the team and being a stalwart of the defense moving forward. Lenny Yoro's obviously closing in on a return, so excited to see him. But yeah, a couple of positives in Onana, Matthijs de Ligt. And I already touched on Manuel Ugarte as well. I thought it was his best game in a United shirt so far. Not saying much, but you can see what Ugarte will bring in certain matches. The tenacity that he has, the ability to win the ball back, the ability to get back and make blocks like he made on the goal line, essentially denying Fenerbahce an equalizer before it came. There are some positives to take, but obviously the results and the performances mean that the negatives are going to be blown up much more. And I think that's the right case. So causes for concern, but there are some positives to take out of this as well. And I'll just finish off in a second with a quick look at West Ham, but a quick shout out for Jose Mourinho, who, look, I don't know how you guys feel about Jose Mourinho. Obviously, he's managed Chelsea, he's managed Tottenham, he's managed United, he's managed Real Madrid, he's managed Inter, Porto. He ran down the touchline 20 years ago when Porto knocked United out of the Champions League and rubbed people up the wrong way straight away there. He had his spell at United, left in 2017 or 2018. He left in 2018 after a 3-1 defeat to Liverpool. Didn't live up to the promise of what we hoped at the time in the case of Mourinho versus Pep. Obviously, City stormed away at the time, and Mourinho was often referred to his finish with United in second place behind Man City as one of his greatest achievements in football. And jokingly said before the game in the week that hopefully he'll get a bonus and a winner's medal after the decision on Man City's 115 charges, which was just some classic Mourinho. But there were some great moments from him last night. Personally, I think Mourinho is fantastic value for football. I think he is iconic. The term box office is thrown around a lot with Mourinho. And look, I love watching him. I love listening to him speak. And I think he's hilarious. I really, really do. But I understand that that's not the case for everyone. And obviously his spell at United didn't go all that well, although people maybe look back on it now and think he did well for what he had and the difficulties within the club that he had to deal with at the time. But just a couple of reminders last night about exactly what he brings. An amazing red card. We saw pictures of him, obviously, elevated from where the bench is and watching the game from a different area. It wasn't too far away, obviously, but just so much fun. Love seeing him lose his rag. There was a moment where he was at Tottenham and him and his assistant, João Sacramento, I think it was, at Tottenham. There's a clip which goes around. It was one of my favorite clips ever of him storming off the bench, him and his assistant running up to the assistant referee demanding a card. It's one of the funniest things I've seen. And obviously, an amazing rant last night where he comes out and says the referee is an absolute genius for being along the lines of knowing not to give the penalty that he thought Fenerbahce should have had and seeing at the same time his reaction and his behavior to the decision. So he sent him off. And some classic Mourinho-isms coming out of that. I love it, honestly. If you don't, sorry, but I just wanted to express that I love it. I think he's such good value to football. I really miss him being in the Premier League. And what I will say, he's the type of, and this is how I see him nowadays, he's the type of manager that football needs and your league needs. You need to see him, but not at your club. That's where I stand on Mourinho. And it was a lovely reminder to see him being at his classic Mourinho best in this game. And it's I'd never want him in charge of United again. I'll say that. But just great value and great entertainment for football. And I think he plays into that a bit. He's everyone's favourite villain. Or maybe because he is a villain, some people don't like him. But I just wanted to touch on that. Big shout out for Jose Mourinho before I go. And look, the final line of this, West Ham on Sunday have been awful so far this season. They've been awful. I've been to United West Ham matches at the London Stadium in recent years, and I've seen United lose terribly in this fixture. No matter how bad West Ham are, I think it was one of the, speaking about Jose Mourinho, actually, I think one of the games that I went to was, if I remember rightly, a 3-0 for West Ham under Mourinho, and that was one of the lowest points I can remember. Came out of that stadium thinking, oh my God, is this ever going to improve? And a few years later, we're still talking about the same problems that United have. But look, United go to West Ham on Sunday at 2:00 UK time. And simply put, United have to win. They have to win and they have to start playing well. Look, Chelsea went to West Ham a few weeks ago and tore them to shreds. Arsenal have been to West Ham in this year and beat them 6-1. And United aren't anywhere near on the level of Arsenal at the moment, but they just need to start performing. And I look at this game and I think, oh my God. I've seen United lose this game a few times. They lost 2-0 last season. Big mistake from Kobbie Mainoo in the lead up to, I believe, the second goal. And that's a banana skin. No matter how bad West Ham are, and they are bad, by the way, no matter how bad West Ham are, you can always lose this. And I dread to think how bad and how toxic things will get if United don't put a performance in and don't win this match. So that's where I'll leave it. I can't come and say any confidence that United will go and win this game because I've not seen enough of it. I've not seen enough positives to think that they will win this game and they will break this team down. We're always one step away from a crisis. United might be in crisis mode already in some people's eyes. And yeah, league position and Europa League position obviously spell that out. But make no mistake about it, and I was speaking about this a few weeks ago, if United come back and slip up with Brentford, they got through that one, don't beat Fenerbahce. That's happened. And then lose to West Ham, or don't beat West Ham. Lose to West Ham, I think we'll really turn it up a notch. We're going to be having it. The conversation around the manager is going to be so intense again, and the pressure is going to ramp up. And then Ineos are at a point, decision makers are at a point where they stick through it, obviously, and hope that Ten Hag can come out the other end of it. The noise is going to be so loud if United don't win against West Ham on Sunday. And then you're thinking, what do United do in this situation? Oh, wait, we're going to have to make a quick decision. Ruud van Nistelrooy is right there. Let's do that, and let's paper over the cracks a little bit and plaster it up until we decide what the hell we're doing. Difficult situation. I'd love to hear from you guys on social media at @Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And in the comment section, the Promised Land, a Manchester United podcast on YouTube. Please get in the comments. If you've not subscribed already, please do get in the comments. Let me know how you're thinking. And I'd like to do a Q&A at some point. Plenty of comments still coming in, plenty of questions I still get. So maybe there'll be an episode soon where I compile all those together and run through a few things. So I'd love to hear from you guys. But yeah, it's not getting any easier at the moment to watch or to tolerate. So let me know your thoughts on social media as well at @Scott Saunders. And look, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Sorry for my ramblings. But look, it's difficult at the moment. It's very, very difficult, and never too high, never too low. And a big shout out to Rob as well, just before I go. So, little bit of a emotional one for me last night. So obviously Rob is we developed a great relationship over the years, and last night I on a whim, if you've listened to this podcast for a while and you've got the wrestling references, maybe you hate it, maybe you don't like it, maybe it's no interest to you, but Rob and I, it was something we really, really bonded over and spoke about a lot. We made a lot of references to wrestling in the podcast as well. And last night, impromptu booking of tickets for WrestleMania in Vegas in April next year. And then I sat back and I thought, I'd love to tell Rob about that. But yeah, Rob and I went to Vegas last year, as we spoke about on the pod, the events in Vegas. Rob loved wrestling. I love wrestling. We bonded over it. And I just thought of you, mate. So, difficult one. But I hope you're watching and listening and hopefully not cursing too much about how bad United are at the moment. But look, thanks for listening, everyone. I had to give a mention there to Rob. Miss you, man. And thanks, everyone, for listening and for watching. And let's hope United win at West Ham and we can stop this disaster, this crisis period, and start moving forward. No faith that it'll happen, but hopefully there's always a little bit of hope. So until next time, everyone, this has been the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott. Thanks for listening.